and it's funny, I love looking at people. It's nicer, but we had a big crowd when Leah joined us, and she was amazing. And everyone was so engaged in asking questions. We said, hey, what happens if Leah came back? And everyone could then join in and ask questions. It becomes a conversation, which you can't do in some of the other formats. So that's why we're here. Melinda, I think that you kicked it off. For everybody who doesn't know, I can reveal that Melinda and Leah worked at the same company at the same time. They're both Pearson alumni. Matter of fact, everyone I know from Pearson right now is an alumni, including Naomi Goldstein.
Yeah.
Right? Anyway, so like, for those of you who don't know, everybody here, Angela, you know Leah. Everybody knows Leah, or no? If you don't, I'll just tell you that she, at one point in her life, well, at all points of her life, she's amazing, but she was responsible for strategy and product development for employability learning solutions for North America at Pearson's. She focuses on accelerated skills pathways for industry credentials, as well as student success and career exploration pathways. So essentially, she is a well-known, highly respected person on the future of work, as well as learning, and we had a great discussion about that. And so, Melinda, I think your question where you started was great. Hi, Nick. How are you? This looks like Nick Hare's whatever computer. Hi, how are you?
Hi, Nick.
Well, I could start with a question because Leah, I can't remember. I think it was last week you sent a really interesting article just on how education was going to change, how the top 1% would end up being at these institutions, but that Google and a lot of the other technologies would partner up with all of these colleges, which I thought was really interesting, and have different ways of delivering. And I would love to hear more of your thoughts on that and what you're hearing about that space and how companies are going to make determinations on where these partnerships are. I mean, you look at like University of Arizona, and they've been very much on the forefront of it, but a lot of these universities are trying to catch up. And is that the wave of how universities are going to distinguish themselves? So would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. I think, boy, there's so much stuff that's happening right in the education space right now. And I find it fascinating, but I'm actually really excited about it. I mean, there's a lot of change and it's very disruptive right now. And there's a lot of ambiguity, but there are some things that I hope really happen out of this, or there's some trends that have been going on in education that I think are going to get accelerated because of all the stuff that's happening right now. And one of them, I think, is this partnership between employers and schools. I can't remember how much we talked about it in the last refresh, but one of the things I find fascinating is that companies like Google are recruiting and hiring people out of high school. Now, what we don't know is how much of that is due to the fact that the talent shortage was so severe before coronavirus, and how much is that going to change coming out, right? I mean, in the, leading up to the virus, there was really, employment was high. There was a lack of talent on the marketplace, so to speak. And so employers were having to get very creative about where they went to find people for jobs. And so Google, for example, would go and start recruiting high school students. And part of the pitch there was that students come and work, earn some money, and learn and get your degree as you work, or get your degree but get it later. Come and do some work, grow up, blah, 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 use the workforce to develop some skills, and either Google pays for you to go get a degree, or you leave and go get a degree and go do something on your own. So the talent pool is going to shift dramatically now that when we come out of COVID, because obviously unemployment's very high. And employers are not going to have a hard time finding people, I think, for work. They may have a hard time finding people for certain types of work, healthcare, different types of professions that are going to grow post-COVID. But I think what's going to happen is we're going to see more and more partnerships between employers and schools, where the employers are going to work side by side and say, these are the kinds of jobs that we have, these are the kinds of skills that we need. and the programs are going to have to develop faster. They're going to be probably more skill-based, would be my guess. And they're going to happen over a much longer period of time. And what I mean by that is that I think we're going to see schools, maybe not right out of the gate, but I think that it will get accelerated. We're going to see schools who are going to say, look, a degree is important and we would love for you to get a degree, but we also know that you're going to have to learn over a much longer period of time. And so how do we build an educational experience that allows you to come and get the learning and the training when you need it, go do your work, come back and get the learning and training, go do your work. And it becomes this very cyclical event as opposed to this linear thing that times out after a certain period of time that you've been there and you get a job. So I'll stop there because there's 100 other things that we could talk about. But I think that connection between the employers and the schools is going to become tighter as we move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I know people are joining us as we go. I just want to mention, we are all here to have this discussion with Leah. There's no formality. So if you have a question, either you can put it up in the chat and say you have a question, or you can raise your hand, or just take yourself off mute and ask, okay? That's the reason we're having this. It's a more intimate conversation, and Leah's been so nice to grant us this wonderful time together. If I'm looking around, Kasha said she has a question. I'll pull this off the chat. She wants to ask about schooling being conducted online. We were talking about this before everyone came on, right? Schooling is going to be conducted online in the fall. New York City's considering that, and yet we, at our Gen Well platform, Melinda, I forgot we just happened, we found out that Orlando is going to be back in school in July, right? Ruth just shared that with us at the end of July, which is a huge statement. How do you change it? How does that change the landscape? Scamp of work, where there's so much talk about women being on the front lines, but also bearing the brunt of pressure and responsibility when they have kids. And there's work demands online, and then there's school demands online. Tara's online too, and I know she's feeling that. How do we deal with that? Melinda and I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, the first thing I would sort of say is take a look at the fine print around the statements around what schools are going to be doing this fall, because I think they have plans to do lots of things, but that doesn't necessarily mean that those things are actually going to happen, right? I think one of my favorite quotes from this past week, I don't remember if Jeff Salingo interviewed somebody that was in this space, but a university president said, well, I have plans to work out every morning. That doesn't mean I do it. And I just thought, and that was in response to this idea that some schools have released sort of statements saying that they plan to have, face-to-face classes in the fall. And so the first thing I would say is I think people should be very cautious about what they read into those statements, because I think that I can imagine that schools may be open, but may be open in a very restricted way, may not actually want many students on campus, may have really restricted courses that they're able to deliver face-to-face. And so I just think it's just something to really pay attention to. And Donna, you and I were talking about, when the California state system and the University of California system have just announced their intention to be almost exclusively online in the fall, I think we're going to start to see the dominoes fall with the rest of the country, because so many schools were waiting for the first, for some big school to say what they were going to do to follow suit. And now I think we're going to see a lot of schools.
Is that like the NBA, the first league? Then as soon as the NBA said we're closing, then boom, it'll happen.
Exactly.
I'm hoping you're not right in a sense. I just think geography and regionality has so much to do with it, right? So as I look around the screen, I don't know where everybody's from. I know that some from the Northeast and some of us from the South live in Florida. It's such a distinct difference of the lives that we are living, you know what I mean? And what we feel free to do, our caution levels. I had a friend call up on Saturday night, you must call me right now. And I'm like, oh my God, it's an emergency. I'm seeing what's going on in your neighborhood, and I'm just telling you that COVID's coming and you guys are not going to be prepared and it's bad. And I'm like, I look around, I'm talking to the heads of hospitals. We are not seeing that kind of intensity. So it's interesting, right? So I know California, and I actually spoke to a friend from California last night, and the entertainment industry is all shut down. What they say, their sheltered home is not till the end of August. And you wonder, why would they keep it so long? To your point, could they turn around in July and say, oh, guess what? It's better. We're going to let you out in July. I guess that could happen, right? All right, people are asking questions. Let's see what we got. And Melinda, please do join in here because you know Leah as well as anybody. Oh, you're on mute. Mute, Melinda.
I have a different kind of question. So if people want to hear more about that, we should talk about it. But here's my question. More and more, obviously, everybody's doing their courses online. And Leah, I know one of the things that you worked on at Pearson was, what this was about and the quality of online learning. Do you think with all of the online activity that's happened over the past several months, that these schools have gotten better at doing online learning and these professors have learned the art of teaching this way? Because some of the question as to whether this will work or not in the fall or what will happen will be, is this just Mickey Mouse stuff or is it the real deal and are people really learning? So I'd be curious to get your view on that.
Yeah, I think it's there's a lot in that question. And I think as you know, Melinda, it's very, it's not super simple to teach a really good course online, right? It takes, you can do it and you can do great courses online, but you have to put a lot of time and energy into it, a lot of thought. You've got to structure them in different ways. You've got to build the courses in different ways. You've got to account for different types of engagement that you're trying to make happen in that environment versus what happens in the classroom. And as a result, there are some people that do it very well, and there are some people that do not do it very well. And one of the reasons why, I am in favor of trying to make statements about it earlier rather than later, about sort of calling the fall and saying, is the fact that you give people more time to actually be intentional about putting together a good online course, right? So now you've got more of a runway, you've got the ability to get some expertise, get some help, look at other courses, have other people help you build a course, whatever that looks like, right? Because what we do know is that when it all happened this spring and things had to be converted instantaneously, right? Those were probably not great experiences for everybody, right? If you were already taking an online course, it's already built that way, it was developed that way. But I know this, I was taking a class online, or I was taking a face-to-face class this spring, and it went online, and I can tell you that was not a great experience. And, but I've also taken online courses that have been great experiences. So there are ways to make them really legit, really valuable. I know my husband is a college professor. He teaches a lot of online classes. He puts more time. I mean, the time and effort you have to put into an online class to do it well is extreme. There's a lot that goes into it, but it can be done. And I'm really optimistic that if people are given the runway to do it, that they'll build better courses.
That would be great. But what about, Centuria points out that you have a lot of college students protesting online only curriculum because they feel that the rigor of work is either equitable or not equitable to the cost of school, right? It's like, what's it going to do to the future of colleges?
Well, I think that comment is a legitimate comment, and I think it's more directed at the cost than the potentially the learning in the course itself, right? If you have a good online course and you can learn a ton in an online course, you can engage with students, you're more likely to probably engage with your colleagues online in a class than you are in a face-to-face class in many instances, right? So, but I think the real issue that's coming up is that people have a real issue with the cost of online education. And I think some of that has to do with the fact that we've, what's built into the cost of tuition at a university is that on-campus experience, right? Your access to the facilities, your sports programs, your services, your everything. And so you have this understanding and this buy-in around what you're paying for. And if all of a sudden you're not going to that school anymore, that campus, and you're not getting all of the things that you get with that experience, and what you're getting is this piece of the experience, is probably a really critical piece of the experience, the learning, but it's only a part of it. Well, I think in your mind, I know this as a parent, as a learner, like take your pick of who you would be. You look at that and you think, gosh, is that worth the same amount of money? My son said that to me today, right before I came on this call. He said, if they don't have school if they don't do face-to-face at Arizona State University, why wouldn't I want to go to the community college and pay less for the online course and then just transfer that over? And I said, I don't have time to talk to you about this, so we'll talk about it later. But but you see what I'm saying is that people don't, you equate the value of the price to have more to do with just the learning itself. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what schools do. Do they charge the same amount of tuition? Do they charge less in tuition if you're not there physically on campus? You're not in, I don't know what'll happen, but I suspect we're going to see some breakage in that model.
Really fascinating, right? Ruth, I think you had a question about employment, didn't you?
Yes. So what advice would you give to young people? We get a lot of young people asking questions specifically about finding meaningful, well-paid jobs that will lead to like a career, not just a job for right now. And given this situation, what advice would you give to either pre-college or like just beyond the college level student?
Yeah, Ruth, that's a great question. Well, my advice actually is that even if it's a job for right now, you're building a skill for the future. So, right? I mean, I think people have a tendency to believe like, oh, these, and I've talked to so many college students who feel this way, like, well, yeah, I work for my mom or my dad, or I work as a driver, or I work as a whatever, right? And these entry level, beginning, types of jobs, and they don't see those as jobs where they're building a skill, they're preparing themselves for the future. And I would say it's the exact opposite, right? So, you're building skills all the time, and that's the way you should look at it, and that you should look at every type of work experience. Free work that you do, paid work that you do, entry-level work that you do, work that you do for your parents. It doesn't matter what that is. Think about that in terms of the skill that you're building. And then the key is to make the transition between the skill that you have and sort of how that layers into what could be a better full-time career for you down the road. And you may need additional upskilling or reskilling to sort of enhance it. You may need some sort of certificate or license, to add to that as well. But I think especially in the world that we're living in right now, one of the challenges for people is, I think when I ask high school students or college students, what skills do you think they have? I'll tell you right now, the answer is they don't think they have any skills. Like they literally go, I don't even know what you're talking about. What do you mean? I don't have any skills. I think a big part of our job as parents, as employers, as mentors, is to help people really uncover their skills, get them to see that in fact they do have skills, and what things that they know how to do and that they do every day, their hobbies, the things that they like, those can be translated into skills that you can do for part-time work, temporary freelance type of stuff, but skills that you can build on for career stuff down the road. And so it's not ideal. It's not, I'm not saying that, that's definitely the path that, we all hope everybody has. But given the situation that we're in right now, and given, I would just say, create, build stuff, do stuff, figure out what those skills are, and then you will be able to turn that into something bigger down the road.
I think that's such a great point, because I think women in particular, we tend to sell ourselves short on the skills we have, right? I have this job, I want to do this, I don't have those skills. I'm always like, you have so many skills. We have so many transferable skills that we don't recognize in that way. I think that's a really, really valuable point. Jamie, did you have a question you wanted to ask? You're on, yeah, you gotta unmute yourself, yeah.
Hi, Leah. I actually was just reading Strength Finders, took my test, and I was really fascinated about the concept of working more to develop the things that you are talented at and spend less time trying to develop the things that you're not good at, that you don't have a natural affinity for. And I was wondering if you agree with that, and like if you're really, really bad at math, you know, how much time should you spend trying to get really good at math as opposed to doing what you have a natural affinity for?
Oh my gosh, you just sort of asked the question that I feel like I've, asked and struggled with my whole life, right? I mean, it's the generalist versus specialist kind of debate too, right? I have a couple of different thoughts on that. One is, I think I sort of have, over the course of my career, have grown to believe that I think that there is something that's really valuable about finding the thing that you're passionate about, right? And developing those skills, and not obsessing or worrying about the things that you don't have, right? And that actually it's better to figure out the thing that you really like, know, love, and feel like you have some talent in, and building that out. The interesting model that you see, or that you hear about in the workforce today, is the T-shaped employee. I don't know how many people have heard about this, sort of the T-shaped employee. And what that's sort of an interesting combination of, I think, the generalist specialist kind of thing, and that employers are looking for basically employees that have this T-shaped skill, right? And the top of the T sort of stands for, that's where you have the generalist types of stuff. Like, they do want people that have, the basic human skills, collaboration, communication, some level of creativity, problem solving, et cetera. And maybe even some base level hard skills, right, that might be needed for a job. But they also really look for somebody who's very specialized in one of those areas at the top, right? Something that they go deep on, that they know better than the average person. And so I would say, I think an interesting way to think about how you develop your career and your skills is to think about it in a T-shaped sort of way. You want to have something that you're a specialist in, that you do better than the average person, but you can't do that at the expense of having these, some sense of general skill and competency across the board.
Great.
I love Strength Finders, by the way. Super fun.
We did that. Anybody else? I think Elizabeth, you had a question, didn't you?
Yeah. So what would you say is some good advice for somebody looking for a job right now?
Hi, Elizabeth. Oh boy, looking for a job right now. Well, yeah. Well, the funny thing is, I'm sort of looking for a job right now. So I sort of have lots of empathy for people who are looking for jobs. But there are the great news about, well, there's lots of thoughts I have about this. I'm trying to sort of gather. I'm trying to gather my
It's a broad question.
Yeah, because there's a lot there. Couple of different things. The first is that the good news is, boy, there are lots of different sites that are out there that help you do that, right? Mm-hmm. In fact, I don't have a ton of experience, but I saw one the other day that was really directed at women, and it's like Fairy God Boss, or the Fairy God.
I've seen that. Yeah.
Have you seen that? Yeah, I have not had direct experience with it yet, but what attracted me to it initially was that it was all about women, right? How do we help women get better jobs? How do we get women, involved in this kind of stuff? And I thought, oh, I love that, right? Anything that's sort of helping to empower women, I think is great. So first thing I think is that there are lots of different sites, lots of different people that are out there trying to help people find jobs, connect with their passion. Heather Wetzler's on this call. They have a great business called Q Career, which is all about helping people understand the trades and, connect with people in the trades, that kind of thing. And boy, there are going to be a lot of those jobs that are going to be out there. So I think there's lots of technology. That's the first thing I would say, is that leverage as many of those kinds of sites as possible. The other thing that I feel like everybody knows in theory, but until you have to really go out and do it, you don't understand the importance of it in practice. That is networking. And obviously, if you're involved with Gen W in any way, shape, or form, you have a great network of people that you can connect with and rely upon. But you cannot underestimate the importance and the significance of talking to people, having lots of conversations, letting people know that you're out there and available, being crisp and articulate about your skills, and being crisp and articulate about what you want to do. Because I find that people have a hard time helping you sort of help direct you if you're not clear about where you want to go. So, but just sort of going out and saying like, hey, I'm looking for a job. The next question usually is, well, what kind of job are you looking for? And if you're not crisp about that, even at the expense of feeling like you're going to shut some opportunities off, I think that's a dead end. It stops people in the network from being able to help you. So I would definitely think about that because it's absolutely critical. And the last thing I will say, and this is something that I'm just a believer in personally, and that is I just don't turn down conversations, right? So I know, and I always felt like I never wanted to admit that, because I felt like people would sort of say, well, you're not very careful with your time. You're not prioritizing your time very effectively, right? That it was always a knock if you were generous with your conversations, right? When somebody wanted to connect with you, if you said no because it didn't look like it really was gonna help you in any way. And I think that one of the things I've really thought a lot about in the last year or so is how much, one, I learn from random conversations that I have with people, how many great connections you make with people, especially if you don't go into it thinking about what am I going to get out of it, right? But you're actually just thinking about what am I, how can I help this person? What am I going to learn from this person? And those are ways that you build your network that in ways that you can't even imagine building your network if it's all about, I'm looking for this job. I only am going to talk to the people that maybe can help me get this job, if that makes sense.
It so makes sense. Anybody have any comments on that? I mean, I am so happy to hear you say that. Hi.
Hi, I'm Heather Wetzler from Q
Hi,
Career. Hi. So, one of the things, thanks Leah for the shout out too. So, one of the things that we do is we're connecting students with trade and professional associations, and associations are also a great networking tool. And that's what we talk to students about all the time. Like, one of my passions, one of the reasons we started this company is we volunteer a lot in the underserved communities. And, one of the things that we were finding was not just a skills gap, but the exposure and opportunity gap that exists in the underserved communities. And so by bringing associations to students, what we were talking to them about, way before COVID, was the power of social capital, right? And kids that come from wealthy families, they start networking at 14, right? Because they see their parents doing it. Their parents are bringing them to charity events. They just start integrating that way. And students from underserved communities do not do that. But associations are amazing resources, and even now, so many of these associations, don't get me wrong, they're struggling because a lot of them, in addition to making money off of dues-based membership, is that they make money off conferences, right? So they have one of our clients that we brought in is the Institute for Food Technologists. 70% of their revenue comes from conferences, but they also have all these online learning opportunities, but connecting to associations, and so many of them are still hiring right now for even like events and instructional design. And, you know, and the interesting thing that we see too about associations and the fear that they have is that, you know, a lot of people who've worked in the association space, a lot of them do tend to be older and have been at some of these associations for years, you know, so they're starting to have a feeling that some of these people might not come back after COVID, right? That they might just be like, you know what, like I'm close to retirement, like I'm good, I have enough money and I'm just going to retire, you know? So it's interesting now because it's like, all right, well then how do they get the next generation up to speed, you know, about that industry? Like a third of them are based in DC because they all have lobbying arms, right? So, I mean, that's a certain type of skill, you know, and they're the ones that come up with the regulations, but associations are a great network to tap into for and looking for jobs. And then the other thing I would say is, you know, we're technically a education technology / workforce development startup. And we went through a education technology based in Boston called Learn Launch. It is amazing how many education technology are hiring right now during a recession. It's amazing how many investors also want to invest in education because there's such a big scramble right now. You're seeing that too. But even just like, you know, going through something like Learn Launch's cohorts, you know, I think they're on cohort 10 right now. Like they're actually doing their accelerator virtually. But like all those different companies, a lot of them pitch. Chloe Capital right now is putting money into women-based education technology startups. Chloe Capital, in conjunction with ECMC Foundation, they basically run these pitch competitions where they put in $250,000. A lot of Learn Launches companies have been part of that. I just saw today that Beagle Learning, the co-founder there, is going to be pitching for that. So I mean, even looking at, you know, some of these accelerators too, and most people that maybe wouldn't have felt comfortable working for a startup, right? Like if these startups are funded, you know, like now is it, you know, the chance, you know, the opportunity, and startups are usually the ones that are most comfortable with having remote. Now, you don't have to be based in a certain area. I primarily built my in internet advertising sales before I started this company with my husband, and working for startups. And a lot of time it was working from home.
Yeah. Yeah. Do something. That's the key. Start your own business if you want to.
Is that what you're going to do, Leah? Is that your announcement today?
Well, I will say,
customers, no matter what it is.
Yeah, I know. I will say I have a lot of ideas. That is for sure. So.
Oh, that's funny. Who else has a question? Teresa Minna-Ugg. I now see it's Minnow, but Teresa, did you want to?
Sorry, it takes me a second to navigate Zoom.
We're all in the boat together. We get it.
So, Leah, I'm interested in your thoughts on how you see the K-12 market sort of responding to the need to really hone in on distance learning or remote learning or whatever the heck they're calling it at each school system. But specifically, do you think that employability is going to really impact like CTE programs or college and career readiness programs at the high school level?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in the K-12 level, right? Because certainly most K-12 schools are not online schools. That's not what they do, right? There are virtual K-12 schools, but that's not the bulk of what, you know, what's out there. So I think it's going to be interesting to see if more and more people move to professional virtual online schools, right? For various reasons, that'll be interesting. And also, what does happen? Because I think now, as everybody knows, every teacher, every teacher's having to figure out online in K-12. Every parent is having to figure out how to teach, now because they had to do it with all their kids at home. I mean, that's the place I think that's going to be in some ways the most disrupted, right? And I don't, everyone's really hearing about all the announcements about what happens with higher ed, but I think the real question is going to be what happens with K-12, right? And whether they go back to face-to-face classes in the fall. I do think, listen, I think employability, it was a huge issue before COVID because there was a lack of talent. I think after COVID, there's going to be a huge issue because there's going to be an excess of talent, and there's going to be a lot of there's going to be a big fight to make sure that you've got the best skills, that you're on the track with the best connections to employers, et cetera. And the more that schools are paying attention to that in the high school, the more they're paying attention to that in college, the better off they're going to be, and the more impactful, mission I think they're going to have, because it's not just going to be about, I have a degree, therefore I'm going to get a job. It's not that's not going to be the only thing anymore.
I just had this thought. I don't know if anyone else has been thinking about this, but our kids are now going to go to school, a high school, from some house in some room in their house. Then they'll do online college, and then they'll work from home for their jobs. All of a sudden I had this dystopian view of oh my God, what is happening to the world, right? And yet we are engineered biologically, evolutionarily as social beings, right? We're trying to put together a poll just to get people's impression about whether you read it. If you're safe, would you rather work at home or would you rather work in the office? And it doesn't have to be a binary choice, but it's really interesting how in order to prepare for this, we are creating these, we're creating bubbles that we have to live in. And what does that do to us socially? I mean, you know what I mean? It's very interesting. So Leah, I know you have the answer to that.
Yeah, no, I know. No, but I don't. But I know exactly what you're talking about, because I was, we were actually thinking we're at the point where we want to downsize. We want to, go off and do these things. And now we're oh my God, we might actually have our son living with us for another, 20 years. And, and after having him for already 20 years, I have to say that we're not super excited about that. And so I think that, so I totally understand what you're saying. It just changes how you think about everything. If I'm working from home, if my husband's working from home, if my son lives with us and is doing school and working from home, I mean, we're all experiencing this right now, but we're all thinking that and hoping that there's some sort of quicker end to it all. And now I think the problem is if it's feeling like that it might last for a much longer period of time. And I mean, yeah, I don't have an answer except to just say, if I weren't laughing, I would be crying right now, because that is how I feel in our house right now.
Anybody else feeling like that in their houses that they want to fess up to?
I get it. This is Stacy. I get it.
Hi, Stacy.
Because when you're used to, you're thinking about your life in one way, and then there's an automatic shift that it might not be that way again. That takes a lot of adjustment on everyone's part. But it's interesting. I had a question as you were speaking about productivity in terms of the virtual classrooms and stay-at-home work. We're hearing teachers time and time again say, they just need 3 hours, or they just need 4 hours. Or our dear colleague Tara has a Superboy, and he finishes all of his work in a day for the whole week. So whether it be for school or work, what is this shift in terms of thinking about productivity? How much time do you actually need to work or learn in order to be productive? Because we've all been so attuned to the standard 40-hour work week or 40-hour school week, but now we're hearing that's really not what it needs to be.
Right. Well, this really is, it's going to be interesting to see what all this does to accelerate what is out there in the marketplace today around competency-based learning, what they call competency-based learning. And competency-based learning is the opposite of what we really have today, which is seat-based time learning, right? And so everything about funding in education is based on seat time. It's based on classroom time. How much time are you physically in the classroom? Are you use hours per day that they have allocated to you showing up to an online class? Everything is based in seat time. But there is a movement, and there has been a movement for a while, and there are some colleges that do this, but there are also, and there's a lot of activity around this, and I suspect will be even more around competency-based, right? So it's more dependent on you as an individual, and there are defined competencies that you have to show that you have mastered to to sort of get your credit, let's say, for the class. And if you can master those competencies in a day, awesome. If it takes you a month, okay. And that is then what it does is it allows for the flexibility in terms of your time, right? Maybe I just don't have the time to commit to something because I have a bunch of other things going on, and so I can do it in the time that I have. It also accounts for just different learning styles and, different abilities and where people are on that continuum. And I think it'll be very interesting. I personally believe the more we go to online, the more that's going to really disrupt the funding mechanisms for higher ed in particular, Pell Grants, things like that. And it's going to affect how we evaluate whether somebody has in fact learned something in the class. And in the end, it's really about whether you have mastered certain types of competencies that are built around the subject matter.
So the other thing, Stacy, when you raise that issue, it also, though, doesn't take into account all of the skills going to school teaches. So you have the academic piece of it, but there's the socialization piece, right? There is a physical activity piece, although they've been cutting a lot of that. All of the skills that you build in going class to class or dealing with different teachers, all of that is part of school that, yes, you can get your assignments. I can see Jackson sitting at the table going, okay, Mom, I'm done. And then what do you do to fill out to help everybody or our kids be better citizens in the world? And how do they understand all the different things that aren't in those classes that are part of the ecosystem of a school community? And I think that's what our superintendent here in Jacksonville speaks to, is really the greater value of school in general, and all these skills that are taught. I don't know if anyone has a thought on that. We did do this poll. How about us? How did we come out on that poll, Cher? What did everyone say? I'm just curious.
Ryan Craig wrote an interesting article on Forbes about what you were talking about, Donna, and it is, I'll post it in the chat too. And it was basically, saying that, the kids that lack soft skills now, right? Like that's the #1 complaint from employers, right? When you look at soft skills, it's teamwork and, stuff that students, the stuff that you gain by being more social. Right. And, and basically it's talking about like, this is going to even impact that more if students aren't able to, and even like the power of negotiation, right? Like when you're first entering the workforce, right? And, you're not going to get everything you want, like negotiating, for different outcomes with your coworkers, right? And how is this, online learning just going to impact the soft skills, that this generation is already impacted by, and make that even more, make it worse and even more pronounced.
And that's what I've heard you talk about, Leah, like the top of your list in terms of desirable, right? The robots are coming, but they don't have the soft skills. And now we're actually creating a situation where soft skills are even more diminished in the ability to have them developed. It's fascinating, I think. That's something we can
I don't know exactly. Yeah, I think there's so many different ways that could go. We still have to figure out how to develop those skills. If you're taking classes online, you're working from home, right? How do you build those up? And I suspect there'll be lots of different ways that people get at that. And just, there's a lot of activity in the virtual reality, augmented reality world around this kind of stuff going on right now, where people are, using virtual reality to interact with people in a way and to try to figure out how to build those skills and develop those skills. So I think we'll see a lot more of that happening as well. Or you're just going to see more of a hybrid type of environment, both from learning and a work environment, where you do the learning online, but maybe you go to a school or campus for the more social, types of activities, things where you're building other types of skills.
Right. There's so much more. And Heather, I think your post here is unbelievable. I don't know if you know, but the work we do work with teen girls, and we wrote a book about which is filled with social emotional learning, which we hear across the board from high schools is the key piece that our kids, especially our girls, need. And obviously, it's difficult to get in this environment. But just to wrap it up, unless somebody wants to jump in here who hasn't, and please, Ruth, you have a question or a comment? Love it.
I have a comment. So part of what Team Wow, I'm on Team Wow with Elizabeth. And part of the things that we work on specifically when we're creating the curriculum for our tweens and teens is that space of how do you navigate conversations? How do you make a wise appeal to negotiate in spaces where you have to learn to interact with authority? And that is going to be more difficult. I think there's going to become a space and a place for people to have to create like etiquette platforms of how do you interact on a Zoom call? How do you negotiate the double dutching of getting into conversations? Like my hand was raised for a very long time, right? Like how do you manage those emotions, and how do you interact with your team without layering like what you think they are saying in an email when there's literally no tone attached, but you have a preconceived tone. So those are all things that I think we are all going to have to start emphasizing and teaching, specifically in the work that we do at Generation Wow.
Right. So in closing, this has been a good conversation. And any other thing? I remember we were teasing Leah about this when she first came on the big stage, and there's 1,300 people, and she says, okay, here are all the things that are going to impact the future of work. And guess what? Not one of them was the pandemic. We're like, wait a second, you're this big seer and you didn't even see the pandemic. Like, okay, but no one else did. And here we are, the pandemic is changing things. We can see it. And today we just did this poll. So before we all leave, of all of us who voted, 8 said they wanted to continue to work from home, and 3 said they want to go back to the office. And that's not, I think we had the caveat. It wasn't about feeling safe. If you felt safe in your office, right? We're not saying you wouldn't feel safe. So people are liking working home. And my question, I don't know, Melinda, what do you think? Leah, is that gonna last? Is that a forever thing? Or is it like kind of cool for now and that's all good? Or maybe it's not so cool for now and I wanna get out of here. Think about the real estate ramifications beyond this, but.
I feel like more people are going to have an option to work from home, even though they will have to go to the office during certain days. I think that a lot of companies that resisted it are seeing that they're equally, if not more productive, and that their revenues are coming in. And so I think they will loosen up, and they will also feel there's value, especially as we continue to be protecting ourselves in not having such a critical mass in the office. That said, when all is well and done and we're all healthy again, I think it's going to be a different balance. And I think there will be a different real estate mix as a result of it.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, right? Leah, anybody else have any questions? I just want to make sure. I appreciate everyone's time coming to spend more time with Leah. It's such a joy, honestly, such a joy. Would you like to, anything you'd like to wrap up with?
No, I just want to say thank you everybody for coming. This was great. I love the sort of the smaller informal, question type of conversation. I thought this was great. Thank you so much for the great questions, all the energy and the enthusiasm, all the great work that Generation W does. I'm just thrilled to be associated in any way, shape, or form, and to try to help in any way that I possibly can. So thank you guys so much for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you, and thank you, Heather and Caroline and Teresa and I think who else? Let's see, and Centauria and Angela and Ruth and Melinda and Elizabeth and Tara. This is why I like this, because Jamie and Sherry, and everyone have a great day. Appreciate it. Ciao.
Take care, Leah.
Thanks.
Take care, Leah. You're the best. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.